our goal, as blended kingdom families is to live in kind of in a peace and harmony according to God's will and raise healthy children and have healthy relationships ourselves.
Thank you for joining us for the Blended Kingdom Families podcast. This podcast is for blended families, the people who love them, and anyone who just wants to improve their marriage and family relationships.
BKF exists to break the cycle of divorce, equip marriages, and unite blended families with the truth of God's Word. It is our hope that today you will receive biblical guidance and practical resources that will bring unity and peace to create your thriving, healthy home. Let's jump in.
Hey guys, welcome back to the BKF podcast. We are so excited you're here with us today. If you haven't already, I say this every time, so I'm just hoping it works. Please take an opportunity, like, share, comment, leave us a review, send this podcast to somebody. We'd love to reach more people. If you're listening on Audible, that's awesome. You're awesome. But just know that the full video format of this podcast is on our YouTube channel. You can kind of come and see our faces and see us interact and kind of see how we do the podcast as an overall.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. And we are continuing in our 5-part series, you guys. Instead of doing 4, we're doing 5 this series.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be talking about communication.
Yeah. And guys, if you missed the last 2, we did the first one on parental influence.
Yes.
And then we did the second one on accommodations, which is just, it's all kind of surrounding this concept of, hey, I'm newly blended or I'm blending my family. And what are the things that I need to be thinking about?
Yeah.
This is all based on our book, Blended and Redeemed.
Yes.
That releases September 13th through EXO Publishing. The pre-order is actually live now. So you can actually go to the link tree below and pre-order the book through Amazon. It is forwarded by our good friend, Pastor Jimmy Evans. It is going to be a tremendous resource for the community.
Yes. Yes.
So today. Communication.
Communication. Sorry. Okay. And
We're doing good today.
We're doing good today. We're doing good today. So another area that's overlooked is the child's easy access to communication and to the other parent. So we've encountered a lot of blended families where, it's this tit for tat thing when they're at mom's, sometimes the parent or dad, sometimes the parents, they're like, well, you're at my house. So, there's this need or this want to control their communication or interaction with the other parent, which can really, really negatively affect the child. But then some of us also deal with our children that are, older and now have cell phones and all these devices where they can communicate with the parents back and forth. And so that's just some of what we're going to dive into.
Guys, if we look at this as an overall, why are we talking about this?
Yeah.
And why is it important in blended families? So again, you got to get to the root emotional level of this. As a parent, you want to stay on top in communication with your children, no matter where they are. No matter what they're doing, you want to have at least a daily check-in with them. And again, this is healthy for children as well. They need to stay in contact with both parents. But the truth of it is because of custody and because of situations, it tends to be whenever you leave, I'll talk to you when you get back.
Yeah.
And then there's this void.
Yeah.
This void of, what did you do? Did you have fun?
Yeah.
And then the byproduct of that is as soon as they walk back in your house, they're getting the inquiry of, well, tell me everything that happened.
Yeah.
And because there's been no communication throughout. And I just think that's something that as parents, as co-parents, we can bridge. And not only will that benefit our relationship.
Yeah.
Because again, it itches the part where the parent is in the I don't know stage.
Yeah.
So it reaches out, you're creating connection, but it also is better for the health of the children as well.
Absolutely. And you guys do not fall into the trap of trying to cut the other parent out when they're at your house. And if you're dealing with the opposite parent who is doing that and you're not able to communicate with your child, we just want to encourage you to continue to pray and just to do everything on your part that you can to communicate effectively and healthily. But, that is a tactic of the enemy, and it will not give you a better experience with your child. If you are, not giving them the option to communicate with their other parent while they are in your home, again, like you said, Scott, that can negatively impact them and just continue to negatively impact your co-parenting relationship.
Yeah. The child has two parents no matter where they are.
Yeah.
They have two parents. They have two parents that love them, care about them, want to know what's going on in their life,
Yes.
want to know everything about their child. The bridge is how you are intentionally communicating. And again, I want to talk about this maybe from two stages. So if we could talk about this from like 12 and under and maybe 12 and above.
Yeah.
Because the 12 seems to be the age of like, they've asked for a cell phone so many times, you're like, dude, here, take a cell phone. But that 12 and under and 12 and above.
Yeah.
So if they're littles, 5, 6, 7, even littler, or kind of in that age group, they want to speak to both parents.
Yeah.
So it's just facilitating that connection between the two.
Yeah, and I think when you can share in the celebration of something that your child has done
Absolutely.
with their parent, oh my gosh, can you imagine, your child, going to a sports event, they win their game, and when they return back to the other parent's house, at the end of the weekend, that parent greets them at the door and is like, I heard about your game. That is so exciting. Yeah. Like what that does for the self-esteem and for just the heart of your child versus the opposite. And so, don't be the one to not celebrate in that. Even if you and your ex do not get along, just stepping in and sharing in that experience with them, man, that can be so life-giving. Not only to your children, but even to your ex, as maybe they're like, oh, wow, they took out the time to call me or to text me or to email me and tell me that Sally scored the winning goal at her game. Like that can create unity and peace right there in your relationship.
You get into this thing, and we've heard this kind of saying before, like it's not your weekend. And you run the gamut of what that could mean. Like it's not your weekend to to experience that winning goal. It wasn't your weekend to experience their prom, or it wasn't your weekend to experience their getting an A on a test.
Yeah.
These are all things that as co-parents, I feel like we learn to accept.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, well, I wasn't in the know, or I wasn't able to be there. But this is the great thing about technology. And again, kind of, going from maybe where we were back in the 80s. And, we have on here like a landline, like there's a landline phone, teach your kids how to use a landline. I don't know if many people that have one of those anymore, but we have a technology that allows one-on-one instant FaceTime that you can bridge that gap. It can be everybody's experience to experience the highlights of their child's life.
Well, and both parents, if you think of like strings attached to one another, those strings aren't cut between you and your child, and, they don't stop needing both parents and based on which house that they're staying in. So that communication is so crucial. And you want to be sure to facilitate good communication between the child and the parents when the child is with you.
Yeah. Well, and that could be as simple as, and let's get to a practical, it could be like a scheduled phone call.
Yeah.
Like, hey, listen, you're young and I want to see him every day.
Yeah.
You want to see him every day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make the sacrifice. If you will also make the sacrifice, or I will do it anyway, is, hey, we'll FaceTime you every day at 6:00.
Yeah.
Right before bedtime, we're gonna throw a FaceTime to you. If you're available, great. We'd love to, and facilitate a great conversation that way. Make it about the children.
Yeah.
And give them that high every day of talking to both parents.
Yes.
If you're not able to maybe make that on a scheduled situation, again, just paying attention to the concept, like, hey, you've been here for 3 days. You really haven't talked to your mom or your dad. Let's call them.
Yeah.
That's good. Or send them a text and say, hey, Johnny wants to speak to you. Are you available?
Yeah. Well, and that we typically hear and see that a lot with children at that 12 above age, because when they're younger, it's us having to be a lot more intentional about doing that. But also when they get older, they maybe don't remind you as much of like, oh, hey, I haven't spoken to dad today, because they're with their friends and their social group has expanded. And so they're kind of caught up in all of that. So it's also a place where we still have to stay intentional as parents and remind them, or just be that helping hand to the other parent of saying, hey, yeah, you haven't talked to your dad in 3 days. Why did you call him, tell him about your football game? Did you tell him about the A on your test? Like, just kind of giving that child the opportunity to be a part of that.
Yeah. And if you can't, maybe maybe the last line of this defense is you can also shoot your co-parent updates.
Yeah.
You know, as things are going on or you're experiencing things, shoot a video and shoot that to them. It's the olive branch sometimes that starts creating a relationship.
Yeah.
And again, what we're going for, our goal, you know, as blended kingdom families is to live in kind of in a peace and harmony according to God's will and raise healthy children and have healthy relationships ourselves. So these are all those little things that kind of happen. Moving on to like if the child's a little bit older, we know that there's some unique challenges. You know, Michael is 16, so it's a little different in terms of, you know, how they communicate and maybe the responsibility of communication. So what do you do when maybe they're kind of a little bit older and you may not have as close to tabs on what they're doing?
Yeah, you know, I mean, what I love about, and you know, referencing Michael, he's really great about keeping in contact with his dad. And so when they get to those teen years, you know, it gives them more opportunity to just have some responsibility in that and in their parent relationship. And so I think, you know, one of the things that we do is we still check in with him, but, you know, as far as like texting and like the apps and all that stuff, you know, we do have tracking. We check his phone regularly to make sure conversations between his friends are, you know, healthy and things like that. But again, I think, like we just said, staying intentional to just, you know, kind of keep tabs, be like, hey, have you talked to your dad this weekend? You know, what's going on with them? I know, you know, he recently started driving. And so when he got his license, we have a group text with his dad and stepmom, and I shot a picture. I was like, we officially have a driver, everybody, watch out, you know, and they congratulated back. And then he and his dad got on a phone call, and it was a good conversation for them. So, you know, I think just continuing to be intentional.
Yeah. And we know that especially when teenagers get phones, let's be honest, parents, our weapon now of punishment is taking that away.
Taking the phone or the keys away.
Phone or the keys. So I just want to touch this for a second because I think there's some things to be acknowledged here. So if that is the situation, I'm not downgrading that as a punishment. I mean, I think that's a valid form of punishment and should be used. But we need to make sure that we're intentional about the communication. So if it's gotten to the point where maybe the other parent is communicating with the child through their phone and that's kind of their primary use, if you're taking it away, the first thing you should do is notify the other parent.
Absolutely.
Be like, listen, so-and-so is grounded. He doesn't have his phone anymore. Still want to make sure that you guys stay connected. So if you need to call him, you can call me directly or you can call the phone and I'll call you back. He's just not going to have it on a regular basis. But acknowledging that to the other parent is super important, because how would you feel if you were on the other end and you were trying to make these calls and you weren't getting return phone calls, and then all of a sudden you're like, you don't go to the automatic, well, they don't have their phone. You're going to, well, the other parent doesn't want me to talk to them.
Or something happened to them.
So just be realistic that when that lifeline is created, that communication lifeline, if you decide to take that away, be responsible enough to inform the other parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest hiccups in blended family, you know, when it comes to those teens and their phones and things like that can happen whenever they have their phone taken away. So I love that you said that, you know, just being intentional again to maintain that line of communication and letting them know. So.
And guys, this podcast was really like, how do we communicate?
Yeah.
We were talking beforehand. We could do a whole another podcast on cell phones and you know the importance of being on the same page with your co-parent. We're going to do that. But this one was really about just pay attention to the concept of is your child or are your children communicating with both parents? Are they maintaining good relationships even when they're gone?
Yeah, and I want to back up for a second before we end and say something. You know, I know one of the things that we went through was when Michael would get grounded from his phone, you know, we still allowed him the privacy to go and talk to his dad in another room, not asking him questions of, what did you tell your dad? What did y'all talk about? You know, things like that. I tried my best, you know, and I know you did, Scott, too, to also follow up, you know, soon after with his dad of like, hey, I'm letting you know this went on this week. This is why he was grounded, because there were some times when, you know, what he told dad was not necessarily what happened. And so the parent, you know, the opposite parent can get one view and one perspective of the child's, which is not necessarily what happened. And so, and there can be some manipulation there. And that can cause dysfunction and disunity. And so I think it's also important, you know, if they are grounded from the phone, phone, you're allowing them to talk to the other parent, still communicating, hey, this is what's going on. This is why he got grounded from the phone. These are the actions and steps that we're taking. I just wanted to let you know, this is what's going on, just so that they're aware and that there is no room for manipulation or for lying to go on between the two households or between the parents, or the kids.
Yeah, and it will happen. So again, being intentional about that is so important. Guys, next week, we're going to dive into one of our, literally probably one of the more sensitive topics that we talk about on our podcast.
And we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
We've had Dr. Les Carter talk about it. It's one that we get hit with a lot.
Yeah, it's child manipulation and parent alienation. And we're going to break that up into probably a couple of part series. But it's going to be really, really intentional about that. So we're excited to bring it to you next week. This communication, along with last week and the week before, on this 5-part series on our book, Blended and Redeemed, which will release on September 13th. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Be blessed in all that you do today.
Hey guys, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And you can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we hang out with more amazing podcast guests. And remember, nothing will be impossible with God.